All right, Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Brit Shalom. Welcome to the end of yet another week of productivity and the stopping from such as we stop and celebrate the opportunity to be productive in a different way, emotionally, spiritually. We begin our services with the lighting of candles. You cannot hear me? All right. Gail, would you come up and light candles for us? That's right. It's a punishment. Amen, amen. Shabbat Shalom. Say Shabbat Shalom to someone near you. Shabbat Shalom. Well done. We turn to our Sidurim, welcoming the angels, or the angels welcome us into the spirit of Shabbat, page 13. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Asharet, Malachi Elyon, Melech, Malachi Amakim, Kadosh Baruch Hu. Moachem Shalom, Malachi Shalom, Malachi Elyon, Melech, Malachi Amlakim, Kadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu Nil Shalom, Malachi Shalom, Malachi Elyon, Melech, Malachi Amlachim, Kadosh Baruch Hu. Tzechem l'shalom, Malachi Shalom, Malachi Elyon, Melech, Malachi Amlachim, Kadosh Baruch Hu. We turn to page 15. Lechu niranena l'Adonai, nari'a letzor yishenu, nikadma fana b'toda, b'izmirot nari'a lo. Arbaim shana kut b'dor v'omaram tu elevavhem v'hem lo yadu derachai asher nitbati v'yapi mivon el menuchati. Page 16. Shiru l'Adonai, shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz, shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, basru meyom leyom yeshuato, sapru v'goyim kevodo b'chol ha'amim nifleotav, ki gadol Adonai, Om Hulam Me'od, Norahu, Al Kol Elohim, Yalla la, Yalla la la la, Yalla la la la, Yalla la la la, Yalla la, Yalla la, Yalla la la la, Yalla la la la, Yalla la la la, Yalla la, Yalla la, Yalla la la la, Yalla la, Yalla la, Yalla la la la, Yalla la la la, Yalla la 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 la, Ya la la la, Ya la la la. ושאוהבו לנו משפחות עמים הבו לנו. 4 lines from the bottom. Yismechu hashamayim, Yismechu hashamayim, Yismechu hashamayim, v'tagil haaretz, Yeramayam, 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 umelo, Yeramayam, 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 umelo, Yismechu hashamayim, Yismechu hashamayim, Yismechu hashamayim, v'tagil haaretz, Ya'alo sadai v'chol asher bo az yiranenu kol atzei ya'ar, lifnei Adonai kiva kiva lishpot haaretz, yishpot tevel b'tzedek ve'amim be'emunato. Page 17. Adonai malach tegel haaretz yismechu yin rabbi manavar af el sevav tzedek u'mishpat makon kiso ish lefanav. Or zaru ala tzadik ol Yisrael simecha, simecho tzadikim v'Adonai v'hodu lezecher kodsho. Mizmor shir shir chadash ki niflaot asa. Shir Elohim kodsho. Shofar hariu lefnei Hamelech. Lifnei Adonai kiva lishpot haaretz, yishpot tevel b'tzedek ve'amim b'meisharim. 19. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtakavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtakavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu, romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. We turn to page 20, we rise, a psalm of reflecting the day of Friday, but reflecting God's power in the universe as we begin our progression into Shabbat. Mizmor leDavid, havul Adonai b'nei Elim, havul Adonai, kavod va'oz yalala, havul Adonai, kevod shemo ishtakavu l'Adonai be'arat kodesh, kol Adonai alamayim el hakavod hirim, Adonai amayim rabim, kol Adonai ba'koach, kol Adonai be'adar, kol Adonai shover arazim, vayshaber Adonai et arzei avanon, vayarkidem kemo egel Levanon, v'Sirion kemo v'nare'emim, Allah kol Adonai חוצב להבות אש, כל אדוני יחיל מדבר, יחיל אדוני מדבר קדש, כל אדוני יכול אל הילוד, ויחסו יערור, ובהיכלו כולו אומר כבוד, יאללה אדוני למה בו ישב וישב אדוני מלך לעולם, אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום, יאללה לה 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 לה, יאללה לה לה לה, יאללה לה 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 לה, יאללה לה 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 לה. May be seated. Turn to page 21 and join together Lecha Dodi. Lecha Dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nikabela, Lecha Dodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nikabela, Shamur v'zachor b'dibor echad, Yishmi'anu elam yuchad, Adonai echad, Ushemo echad, L'Shem u'tiferet v'litila. Lecha Dodi Dodi, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nikabela, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nikabela, likrat Shabbat lechu v'necha, ki mikor habracha, mehirosh mikedem, nisucha sof maaseh b'machshavat chila. Lecha Dodi Dodi, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nikabela, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nikabela. Mikdash melech ir melucha, Kol mitzei mitoch ha'hafecha, Rav lach shevet bi'emek habacha, Vehu yachmol alaychem la. Lecha Dodi Dodi, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nikabela, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nikabela. Hidna ari me'afar kumi, livshi bigdeti partecha mi, Ayad ben Yishai beit alapmi, koreva el nafshi ge'ala. Lecha Dodi Dodi, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nikabela, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nikabela. Hitoreri, hitoreri, ki va'ore kumiori, uri uri shidaberi, kevod Adonai alayik nigla. Lecha Dodi Dodi, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nikabela, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nikabela. We turn to page 22, the final stanza, and we rise. בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצוהלה, תוך אמוני הסגולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי דודי, לך דודי, פני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. May be seated. Psalm for Shabbat, page 23. Odinu v'meseva d'shenim v'rananim yiyu le'agid ki asher Adonai tzuri v'lo v'lataboy. Adonai, Idotecha nemenu modavedecha nava kodesh Adonai le'orech yamim. Mourner's Kaddish, page 24. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah. V'yalmad divrach yirutei v'yamlich machutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'vizman kariv yimru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach li'alam l'amei omayah. Yitbarak yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei d'kudisha brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran b'yalma v'yimru amen. Yehi shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Excuse me. We turn to the Ma'ariv service on page 28. We ask you to please rise for Baruch. Be seated, and thank you. El Chai v'Kayam Tamid Yimloch Aleinu Le'olam Va'ed Baruch Ata Adonai Ha'Ma'ariv Aravim. Page 29. Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Amcha Avta Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadita Al ken Adonai Eloheinu b'shokvenu u'b'kumenu Nasiach b'chukecha v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha u'v'mitzvotecha li'olam va'ed ki hem chayenu v'yorech yamenu v'yorech yamenu Uvahem negeh yomam v'layla, yomam v'layla. V'yavatecha tasir mimenu le'olamim, Baruch ata Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, ושירתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוקבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Continue silently, pages 30 and 31. Adonai Elohechem Emet. V'yemana kazov v'kayam alen ki hu Adonai Elohim v'yin zolatov v'anach Yisrael lamo hapadim yam Elohim akin v'kol v'nikol. ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ובני ישראל קנו שירה בשמחה רבה ויאמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורתי אלוהים מלכותך ראו בניך בוקע ים לפני משה זה לי ענו ויאמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כי פדרנו את יעקב גלום יד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאה ישראל. Page 33. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu makenu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu makenu l'chaim. ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך, ברוך אתה אדוני, הפורש סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים. We rise and join together, page 34. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם אותי לעולם אותי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את שבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ויאמר דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ידך בית ישראל בגלה בגלה ובזמן קריב יאמרו יהי שמירה במברך לעולם עולם יומיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי קודשה בריחו לעילא מנחה ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תאמירן בימה ויאמרו. The Amidas are recited silently and standing, beginning on page 35. Ose shalom bimromav, hoyase shalom aleinu, v'yakol Yisrael, v'yimru amen. Yas shalom, shalom aleinu v'yakol Yisrael. 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 V'imru. Shabbat shalom. So first of all, you should know Rabbi Teller is not here this week because he's celebrating Ariela's graduation. And so he's up in Missouri celebrating, and we wish him mazel tov and lots of joy. So, a young man recently penned an honest cover letter seeking employment, and he posted it on LinkedIn, and eventually it went viral. Here's the letter. My name is Ryan Lowry. I am a 19-year-old, and I live in Leesburg, Virginia. I have autism. I also have a unique sense of humor, am gifted at math, am really good with technology, and a really quick learner. I'm interested in a job in animation or IT. I realize that someone like you will have to take a chance on me. I don't learn like typical people do. I would need a mentor to teach me, but I learn quickly. Once you explain it, I get it. I promise that if you hire me and teach me, you'll be glad that you did. I will show up every day, do what you tell me, and work really hard. Please let me know if you would like to talk with me about this. Thank you, sincerely, Ryan Lowry. So what would you do if you were an employer in animation or IT and you got this letter? Would you hire the young man with autism? Or would you be moved by the letter, but then move on to other candidates? The Torah portion this Shabbat, the Seder of Emor, addresses the issues of disabilities. As a matter of fact, my heart sinks every time I read this text because it's so out of line with our modern sensibilities and our understanding of the place of those who are differently abled within our community. In this portion is a long list of those Kohanim, those priests, who because they have a physical defect of some kind are not permitted to officiate in the sanctuary. It's a long list, and there are a dozen defects described. If a Kohen is blind, if he's lame, if he has a limb that is too short or too long, if he has a broken leg or a broken arm, if he is a hunchback or a dwarf, or if he has a growth in his eye, or he has a scar or scurry, or if his genitals are injured, he is not qualified per the Torah to offer up sacrifices to God upon the holy altar. And to make it worse, the section concludes by saying, he shall not profane those places that are sacred to me, for I, the Lord, have sanctified them. How do we relate to these biblical verses that discriminate against and diminish the dignity of the disabled? For many centuries, biblical commentators have sought to make sense of this passage, and they try to explain away its prejudice. Some have explained it historically, saying, that was then, this is now. They have pointed out that since the fall of the temple, these laws no longer apply, and today all Kohanim can have the first Aliyah. All Kohanim can officiate at a Pidyon HaBen and can do anything and everything that any other Kohen can do. Somewhat comforting, but it really doesn't address the question. Others have tried to explain it practically. Commentators say a Kohen who is blind or lame or a dwarf would have difficulty doing some of the heavy work that the Kohen performed in the sanctuary, and therefore he'd be excused. Also somewhat comforting, but it doesn't come close to explaining all the handicaps on the list. Why can't a person who has a scar do the work that the Kohanim did in the sanctuary? What's the connection? What's more, this explanation fails to address the astonishing statement at the end of the section that says, "V'lo yechalel et mikdashi," he shall not profane these places that are sacred to me. Is the presence of a disabled person truly a desecration of God's sanctuary? How can that be? Rabbi Brad Artson suggests the following. He says that this law is a reminder that none of us but God is perfect. And therefore, we must come before God in our shlemut, with a sense of completeness that comes from admitting our imperfections. I say a wonderful spiritual insight. Doesn't work for me. Rabbi Jack Reamer approaches the text in this way. He says, my answer to this question is, I don't know. I really wish I did, but I don't know. Well, that's not very satisfying either. Doesn't work for me. As a conservative Jew, I hold the belief that the Torah was divinely inspired, but not delivered to humanity word for word. God's Spirit may have moved within the early writers of pieces of the text, as well as the redactors who put it all together over time, and so therefore we have this text as we know it. God's message, God's truth with a capital T, is perfect, unchanging, and infinite in its scope. But we are finite beings. We are incapable of fully hearing and understanding God's infinite message, a message that ultimately was corrupted by the very human filters through which we see the world. As I heard repeatedly during my seminary days, ours is to determine what is divine and what is human in the biblical text. And as such, one response to these verses that are so difficult for us is to say that they don't necessarily reflect God's will, but rather the very human discrimination which was part of the ancient Israelite text and the culture. Now, before I beat up too much on Judaism, let me give you a perspective. At the same time, I need to be able to appreciate the context from which these words emerge. Even though the Torah's bias against those that are Torah's words are biased against those that are disabled and differently abled, represented a huge moral step forward nonetheless from the common behaviors of the ancient civilizations from which it emerged. Take Greece, for example. Plato says the following: you should provide treatment for those of your citizens whose physical constitution is good. As for the others, it would be best to leave the unhealthy to die. And Aristotle, in full agreement with Plato, says, let there be a law that no crippled child should be reared. So in comparison to the standard of the ancient Greeks, the Torah's limitation on sacred service seems, although flawed, quite a bit more mild and actually somewhat progressive, a step forward in the process. In the Jerusalem Talmud, we read that Rabbi Yochanan asked the following question. He said, each of the 40 days that Moses was up on Mount Sinai, God taught him the entire Torah. And each night, Moses forgot it. And the next day, he taught him it again. And the next night, Moses forgot it. Finally, God just said, you know what, I'm just going to give this to you as a gift. If so, why didn't God just give it to him on the first day? So Rabbi Yochanan answers his own question. He says he taught him the Torah over and over and over again each day in order to encourage teachers of slow learners. This powerful midrash speaks not only to teachers, but to parents and siblings, nurses and doctors and caretakers, family, friends, neighbors, communities, and employers, and even to synagogues. It teaches us that even those with different abilities, given the adaptations, support, the inclusion, and encouragement, can be among those who most greatly contribute to society and to touching other people's lives. So what do you think happened to Ryan Lowry? Here's the rest of the story. Ryan's post received more than 180,000 reactions and more than 6,000 comments on LinkedIn. One of the people who saw the post was a man named Aaron Perry, an executive at a 3D and animation studio. And Aaron brought Ryan's story to David Siegel, sounds pretty Jewish to me, the executive director of Exceptional Minds, an academy that trained people with autism in the art of animation and helped them with job placement. David immediately offered Ryan a scholarship, saying Ryan was the perfect candidate. May it be God's will that we each bring our own extraordinary abilities to the improvement of the lives of others, as well as assisting others to utilize their special skills to further enhance life for all. May we continue to progress, and may we learn to live that message every single day. Shabbat Shalom. Page 47, we rise. ויחולו השמיים והארץ וכל צבאם ויחל אלוהים ביום השביעי מלאכתו אשר עשה ויכבוד ביום השביעי מכל מלאכתו אשר עשה ויברך אלוהים את יום השביעי ויקדש אותו כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו אשר ברא אלוהים לעשות. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו אלוהי אברהם אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב אלוהי שרה אלוהי רבקה אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא אל העליון קונה שמיים וארץ מגן אבות מחיי מתים במאמרו האל הקדוש אין כמוהו המניח לעמו ביום שבת קודשו כי רצה להניח להם כי רצה להניח להם לפניו נעבור ביראה ופחד ונודה לשמו בכל יום תמיד נענה ברכות אל ההודאות אדון השלום מקדש השבת ומברך שביעי ומניח בקדושה לעמדו שני עונג זכר למעשה וראשית אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו רצה במנוחתנו קדש ונפשנו במצוותיך, ותן חלקנו בתורתך. סבנו מטובך, ושמחנו בישועתך, ותאר ליבנו לעבדך באמת, והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה וברצון שבת קודשך, ואנוכו בישראל מקדש שמך. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. יתקרא ויקרא שמי רבה, מימה דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ומכון וחי לכל בית ישראל בעגלה בזמן קריב יאמרו. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעלם עולם יומיה. יתברך, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי קודשה בריחו לידע מן כה ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ויאמרו אמן. תקבל צלעות הון ובאות הון דכל ישראל קודם אבל הון דבשמיה ויאמרו. ישלום הרבה מן שמיים וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו. Page 49. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו במצוותיו ורצה בנו בשבת קודשו באהבה וברצון הנחילנו זיכרון למעשה וראשית כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש זכר ליציאת מצרים כי בנו בקרת אותנו קידשת מכל העמים ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. חיים. Page 51. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עמונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ובאים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומושב עיקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת זו בגובה מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אממקנו וזולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת יום ושבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, בשמיים יאמר, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד, אין עוד. כך כתוב בתורתך עין לך לעולם ועד, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ושמו echad. You may be seated. On this Shabbat, our hearts go out to the families of Ben Geffen, Lorraine Brown, Barbara Hornstein Levinson Bright, and Floris Miller Robson. We're also observing the yahrzeits of Jack Adler, Sam Axelrad, Benjamin Danziger, Morris Domash, Beryl Fizzer, Moses D. Goldstein, Lucille Goodman, Matilda Hassett, Vivian Karpolowski, Edith Kaufman, Ralph Kay, Murray Keller, Pearl Kushner, Matilda Lazarov, Lillian Machen, David Matz, David Michael Novi, David Reichman, Sanford Schneider, Edward Schneider, Saul Senser, Alan Silberg, Judy Silberlicht, Jaco Strumza, Hunter Tuberville, Gladys Wald, Ray Wasserman, Pauline Weisfeld, and Esther Zarin. All those in a period mourning, all those observing a yahrzeit, we invite you to rise. Words of Mourner's Kaddish can be found on page 52. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah. B'alma divra kirutei v'yamlich ma'afutei. V'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayeh d'chol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'v'zman kariv yimru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach li'olam l'omei omaya. Yitbarak v'yishtabak v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei. V'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei d'kudesha barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran bi'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. You may be seated. So Shabbat Shalom once again, and I also remind you that Rabbi Teller is at Ariela's graduation, and we wish him and the entire family Mazel Tov. Couple of announcements. Morning Minyan every day, Sunday through Friday on Zoom at 9 a.m., not 9 p.m. Don't show up for the morning Minyan at 9 p.m., show up in the morning. This Sunday, we have another workshop, this time given by Houston Jewish Funerals at 11 o'clock in the morning here in the sanctuary or on Zoom. Just let me assure everybody, because every time we publicize something like this, we get some emails back. We have reached out to all the other Jewish funeral parlors as well and offered them the opportunity. We haven't necessarily heard back. So, there's an automatic assumption that, gee, we're endorsing somebody. The answer is no, we're not. We opened it up, and this is who they come to us. They say, can we offer this? And we say yes. Next Saturday, the 21st, we're going to begin something new. We're going to try a Saturday morning Ruach here in the sanctuary. Rabbi Teller will be leading that service. It begins at 10 a.m. Simultaneously in the chapel, we will have the traditional service as well, beginning at 9:30 as it normally does. We welcome you to come, try one, try both, just come. We don't care where you go, just come. We want you here. One other event I want to make sure everybody is aware of, on Saturday evening, June 4th, the first evening of Shavuot, we've expanded our Shavuot programming from years past. In the past, we did it ourselves, and then we invited Beth Israel to join us. This year, Beth Israel Beth Yeshurun, Emmanuel, Houston Congregation for Reformed Judaism, and Orami will all be here in our sanctuary. The presentations are being done by all of the rabbis and cantors and educators from those communities, and we're very excited to be able to create a community-wide study opportunity. We hope you'll be here with us. Rabbi is teaching, I'm teaching, and there's a lot of opportunity to learn, for us to learn as well from one another. Very exciting moment. Anything else? The wisdom from Melissa on the side? No, nothing else. Okay. We conclude our services with Hatikva, page 395, and we ask you to please rise. O Lord, believe afnima nefesh Yehudi homia ofate mizra kadima hayin letzion Sophia. O Lord, Atikvatenu hatikva bat shnot alpayim liotam chofshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim liotam chofshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim. As is our tradition, we invite you to reach out to someone in your area. We'll extend blessings one to the other. Yivarechecha Adonai ve'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichonecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. Shabbat shalom.